traditional custodians of the land where we're having this particular seminar, the Wurundjeri Wurrung people, and on your behalf, pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. So we're here for the seminar, the Youth Enterprise Hub. You're going to find out a bit about how that got going and what's been achieved so far. You'll hear from some people who've been involved in some really practical aspects of that over the past few years. We're also going to hear from some people who are working in the same space but haven't been associated with the hub until today. And you'll have the opportunity to reflect on the value of this particular program for you today, and also what next steps you or your organisation might take in the space associated with youth enterprise and entrepreneurship. Just a brief little bit about me. I've been a teacher, a leading teacher, curriculum coordinator, a school principal. I ran an HR consultancy business for some time. I've been a careers counsellor and a mentor and coach to many young people over many years. I'm currently the chair of the Youth Enterprise Hub Working Party and have been in that position for about, 4 or 5 years, I think. I'm involved with the INLEN, the Inner North Local Learning and Employment Network, and there are several of the staff members here today, two of whom will be presenting, and the others will be here to assist you if you've got any questions about the work they do. But I'm involved with quite a number of the working parties and so on that form part of the LEN. The Youth Employment Task Force, going back about 7 or 8 years, identified that enterprise and entrepreneurship for youth was an important plank in providing effective pathways to young people towards employment. And there was a research paper completed in 2017, and the worthwhileness of setting up a hub was identified. It was also one of the research outcomes was the fact that there was lots and lots of enterprises in the inner north that were run by, coordinated by, founded by young people. A lot of those had a green, ethical, socially responsible flavour to them. So that was something that underpinned the first steps taken to set up an effective hub. I just want to acknowledge the work of Vivian Sercombe, who did the research and then took some significant steps over the past few years to make the hub come alive and be an important part of the offering in the inner north. There's probably some other people that should be acknowledged too. Obviously, the inland staff who've been involved, as well as Vivian, but also there was some support from the Bendigo Bank in Clifton Hill, North Fitzroy. They were a funding partner, so was the Inner North Community Foundation. We'll hear a little bit from a representative from there later on. The Commonwealth National Disability Insurance Agency provided some funding for parts of the programs that have been run. The 3 municipal councils, Yarra, Moreland and Darebin, together with the state government and Northern Partnerships, also provided some funding. So we do acknowledge that, and we look forward to continuing support from those people, of course, if they happen to have any representatives here today. Just a couple of things that have happened during that time. As well as a working party, we had some think tanks for students, teachers and local entrepreneurs and enterprise leaders back in 2018. There was a range of teacher development programs to open teachers' eyes, if they weren't already open, to the possibilities of this sort of program and opportunity provision for young people. Trang Du of 2 Square Pegs was very much a leading light in running those professional developments. The City of Yarra's young local entrepreneurs also ran some programs on enterprise skills, workshops for VCAL students. There were teachers co-designing a new economy enterprise course over 2019 and 20. And again, that was for VCAL students. And through that, there was like a a community of practice, good practice in that space that was formed and can be taken further. And today is an opportunity to do that as well. And COVID hit, of course, and that slowed a few things down, but it also creates the opportunity for innovation. And so the micro enterprise unit was trialled in 4 schools over the last couple of years, and that's had some very positive outcomes as well. Again, that was for VCAL students, and that was started in 2020 and ran again in 2021. A lot of the sorts of schools called 21st century schools, they've been around for a long time, but they're more important in the 21st century. Things like innovation, resilience, collaboration, project management, passion, risk-taking, and goal setting. They're some of the things that are very important in terms of enterprise skills, but I think they're important for every young person anyway. They're also the sorts of things that can help you in a love affair or a relationship, I would have thought, just reflecting on my own experience. So that's that. We've done that, thank you. So there's different ways in which these sorts of positive outcomes for kids can come about. You'll hear a little about some of those programs that have been run under the auspices of Inland and the Hub over the past few years, but we're also going to look at some other options that may well be of value to people in the inner north. They might be able to be combined with some things that are already offered through the Hub, or they'll be added to the Hub and provide options into the future. So we'll start with that. And I'm going to introduce our first speaker. It's Peter Sacco. He's General Manager of Social Enterprise Academy of Australia. That was set up by the Australian Centre for Regional Entrepreneurship. And it's about programs. It started in primary schools, but it also has moved into secondary schools. It's not just regional. A lot of people are moving from the urban to the regional, but this particular organisation are actually doing it the other way around, regional into urban. Peter's had extensive experience working in this particular field. He's inspired by the creativity and innovation shown by, well, people of all ages, but particularly young people. He worked as a business and life coach, and he specialises in supporting social enterprise startups and so on. He's going to talk about the Social Enterprise Academy. So please make Peter welcome.
Give that a second. Good morning, everyone. Great to meet you all, and thanks for having me. There we go. So my name's Pete Sacco. Thank you very much for that introduction, Pete. There's a few Peters around today, so yeah, if you're not sure, just call out Peter. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting today, and all those who may be zooming in today for today's session. And it's a great pleasure to be here. Peter contacted me a couple of months ago to see if I would join this seminar today to share some of our lived experience from the work that we've done over the last 7 to 9 years. So it's a great privilege to be able to come in and share our experiences. Just by way of introduction, I head up the Social Enterprise Academy here in Australia. We're one of 14 hubs globally around the world. And ACRE brought Social Enterprise Academy to Australia about 7 years ago. And our CEO, Matt Farlett, he discovered the Social Enterprise Academy whilst he was on a Churchill Fellowship about 9 years ago. And he was really looking around the world and exploring what enterprise programs, learning development programs were out there around the world that were really focused on supporting young people. No matter where they were, whether it be regional, rural, or in urban settings. And programs that could scale and programs that were sustainable. And it was on his visit to Scotland where he landed upon Social Enterprise Academy. And we were the first country outside of Scotland to introduce a hub outside of Scotland. And now that's grown, as I said, to 14 hubs around the world. So places like Malaysia, South Africa, Egypt, the list goes on, India, Malawi. And so there's lots of lived experience and combined experience from all of that as well. As an organisation, the Social Enterprise Academy is specifically a learning and development organisation that does focus on enterprise, leadership, broader learning and social impact for adults, around cross-sector leaders across local government, business and the community sector in particular, but really importantly also young people, which is what I'm going to focus on today. So why did Matt go out and try and find this particular organisation or particular model that focused on entrepreneurship to address these particular issues that young people were facing here in Australia? And I don't think these issues, these challenges for young people are going to be a great surprise to any of you around the table based on the work that you do and the experience you've had with young people. But I really just wanted to flag these five because I think there's quite a few more challenges as well. But what we've found in the time we've been operating here in Australia is that there's definitely a growing disengagement from education in young people. And this isn't just young people in secondary school. This is starting in primary school. There's a real decline in mental health and wellbeing, which we're seeing, exacerbated over the last couple of years with COVID. And schools are really kind of challenged around how they can tackle that and support that. There's also this growing lack of opportunity for young people to contribute to their community in a real meaningful way. Very different to when we were younger and we'd follow our parents along, contributing to community in some way. And it's not to say that young people don't want to contribute. They really do. They just don't have access to it. You put on top of that the ever-changing landscape of employment, which is, can be really scary for a lot of young people, and not knowing what's going to be ahead, how to prepare, what do I study, what subjects do I do to prepare for something I actually don't know what's going to happen. And then lastly there, it's really difficult for young people to have a say and to be heard and to play a leadership role in their community and to make a difference to the things that they care about. I get this all the time right now because I have a 16 and a 15-year-old son and daughter, and that is one of the biggest things that, that they share with me. So what's our challenge, all of us here in this room? How can we create an enabling environment for young people that really genuinely harnesses their talents and their interests, while also helping them build, more resilience, while making a difference to the things that they care about in their world, not ours, in their world. So that's our big challenge. And that's where we've landed on particular approaches, in particular around introducing entrepreneurial learning programs to young people and how we give them access to that. So why entrepreneurial learning pathways? As I've just touched on, really simply, so that we can support young people to be better prepared for a changing future. We don't know what that future is going to be. They don't know what that future is going to be. But entrepreneurial learning and all the things, the 21st century skills that Pete just mentioned earlier, they hold them in amazingly good stead to be prepared for the future. And we already know the predictions around the changing requirements of work into the future, that there's going to be a greater requirement for enterprise capabilities in jobs across the board. And there's some really great work that Foundation for Young Australians have done over the last 7 to 10 years. And we're really lucky to have Foundation for Young Australians here in Australia, because before they'd completed their research, we didn't have any data to work with. And so that's really shifted the dial. And that's why there's been such a really big focus here in Australia around the importance of this, which was really great for us because it really supported the great, the things that we were hearing from colleagues elsewhere around the world. And so what we were wanting to do was we wanted to accelerate our role that we could play in helping create an enabling environment. That's why we brought Social Enterprise Academy here to Australia. So what does it look like when it's been done really well? Let's kind of cut to the chase. Don't have a lot of time with you this morning. We've got about 20 minutes. So, but we'll have some time for questions in a little while. These are some key things from our lived experience. These are the things that in the programs that we deliver and how we work with young people and how we work with schools and the cross-sector leaders that support them, these are the key things that we find are really, really critical. And that these are the key principles in what drive our work. It's really important that young people have a chance to lead their own learning, and that we take a strengths-based approach around that. So they're doing the things that they actually really enjoy doing, and that allows them to have a voice in what they're doing. Really importantly, it's got to be fun. It's got to be engaging. Young people really want to make a difference to the things they care about. They genuinely do. The very first thing we do when we work with young people in our social enterprise schools program is we ask them what they care about. What sort of difference would they like to make in the world? And their world could just be in their local community, or could be something more broader than that. And that just doesn't only give them a sense of purpose, that helps them see beyond themselves, which is really important, that we create that opportunity for them, because we all think that, I think that with my teenagers, that all they do is they care about themselves. They don't. They care deeply about lots of other stuff as well. We just don't often ask them. But it also allows for them to actually think creatively and bring innovation to their thinking. We talk a lot about capabilities development, and that could be one particular area, or it could be a broad cross-section of capabilities. In the school curriculum, there's a lot of things that the teachers we need to cover in education, and that can be a bit tricky sometimes. So how do we actually approach that in an authentic way, where young people actually realise they can see for themselves that it's actually real? And this capability development stuff that you're talking about, I get it. I can see where this is going to take me. And they want to do that in a practical way, hands-on. It's accessible for everyone, anyone of any capability or capacity or ability. When we talk about entrepreneurial and being entrepreneurial, I don't know about you, but being entrepreneurial is pretty difficult sometimes. And how do we actually? And I think for our generation, entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial is a bit of a dirty word with the Scases of the world. And when I was growing up, it's like, oh, they were the guys actually doing dodgy things. And now we're talking to young people about having to be entrepreneurial. So for us, in helping young people realise that, we've got to have a bit of a mind shift. We've got to do some development in this space as well, and understand what it actually takes to be entrepreneurial. And really, entrepreneurship it's about doing entrepreneurship. How do we create an environment where young people can do entrepreneurship? And really, in simple terms, that is about putting ideas into action. No matter how simple that idea can be, at least they're putting it into action. They're seeing through their idea. And they can do that in a real world context. And that's where we see it works very well in entrepreneurial learning programs. And where it's not just, something happening in school, they can see the difference it's making more broadly out in community, because at the end of the day, that's where they're going to be living. And it's got to be easy and flexible. This is the trick. And for the teachers in the room, can I have a show of hands with a number of teachers or education leaders in the room? Yeah. So the last thing you want is someone coming to talk to you about, this is something you could do, and you can't get your head around it. And you're thinking, how the hell am I going to make this happen with my cohort of students? How do I fit in the timetable? How do I get my head around the resources? How do I access the resources? All these things. You are a critical part of this equation. If we do not make things simple for education leaders and educators, we're not going to be able to move the dial on this, and we're not going to be able to make entrepreneurial learning accessible for young people. So you play a really big part in all of this. So broadly, we believe that enterprise capabilities should be treated with the same respect as numeracy and literacy. Now, I can tell you, most people go, yeah, okay, that makes sense now. 7 years ago when I started with this, and I was talking to education leaders, it was pretty difficult to kind of have people kind of listen and kind of understand, well, where does this all fit? It was a real disruptor. We were a real disruptor at that time, and it was something different, and it was kind of like, no, numeracy and literacy, that's it, no. But now we can actually see where the benefits are coming from. And really importantly, Pete mentioned that we do this with primary school students and secondary school students, and we do. It's really important that start early as possible. It's just like anything. The more time you've got to do something and practice something, the better you get at it. Now, I've worked with a lot of teachers in primary school, a lot of teachers in secondary school, and there's this disconnect. Something happens between primary and secondary, and all the social stuff that's going on for young people, all the other demands, things change. Their creativity changes, their confidence changes. I mean, you ask a kid in primary school, grade 5, 6, why something's a good idea, and they would just go on for an hour, and that you feed off their energy. It's incredible. You walk into a room of year 9 students, year 10, year 11, year 7, year 8, even. It's kind of like, I don't really want to talk until someone else is talking. All that sort of stuff's going on, and it's pretty hard. So how do we create an environment that does allow for people to feel safe in that? And again, that's about peer-to-peer learning. So the Academy has really strong philosophy around peer-to-peer learning, and that applies just the same with young people as it does with adults. Young people have got a lot to learn from each other, as well as the adults they're around. And that immersion, that experience of actually doing it. And then more broadly, and then again, this is the lens and organisations that are in the community that work with schools can see this around the importance of bringing industry and community into schools to give young people more access to role models and to opportunities outside of the classroom. So how do we make that happen? Because let's face it, that's really difficult. That's really tricky, especially over the last few years with COVID. So social enterprise schools. This is one of the ways in which we do this. It's a practical student-led experience that really does focus on giving young people a chance to develop their enterprise skills simultaneously with their citizenship skills and all those other capabilities that things like critical creative thinking, emotional well-being, your core capabilities like numeracy and literacy, it's all in there. And it allows them to actually do all of that together so it makes sense. And it's really simply done through giving a young person opportunity to set up, create their own social enterprise. Now, we use social enterprise as a vehicle to help young people develop enterprising skills, to develop an enterprising mindset and behaviours. And that's why we've landed on social enterprise. And it gives them a chance to also connect the activity they're doing from an entrepreneurial perspective back into the community aspect as well. So this is it. Students, first of all, just like a social enterprise, what is it that they want to make a difference to? What's their social purpose? That's at the core of it. And then they look at the ideation process for coming up with their enterprise ideas. And let me tell you, when things get tricky with the rest of, when you have to get to work, they come back to, hang on, why am I doing this? Just like us, when things get tricky for us in life, we ask ourselves that same question. Why am I doing this? And it's really grounding. And that's the driving force. They're doing it not because the teachers told them or someone else has told them. They're doing it because this is their cause that they want to make a difference to. So what it looks like in a nutshell, and it's very difficult to kind of share this in a short amount of time, but we take the students on a learning journey, a 10-stage learning journey where they do those first couple of things around identifying their social issue, but also looking at, okay, what social enterprise is. We do that not just for the students, we do that for the teachers and the school community as well. So we help them understand. So you don't need to be an entrepreneur as a teacher. You don't have to have any experience or background in social enterprise. That all comes with it. So there's a big part of that. I mentioned earlier, the capacity building for adults as well. This is coming along as well. And then really looking at that whole, the ideation process, giving students a chance to test their ideas, develop them out, working in a group, figuring out what their role in the team is going to be. If that's going to be the case, they're working in a team. Really importantly, then that opportunity to trade, actually running their business. Because it's one thing just to come up with an idea and write it down and go, oh yeah, talk about it for a bit. But it's another thing to bring your idea to life and keep it going. And there's really, really robust resources that underpin all of this, where students actually they've got their workbooks, they develop business plans. The business plans that they come up with are better than most of the business plans that small businesses have in their communities. And then right through to who the customers are going to be, when and where we're going to trade, what are we selling our stuff for, is it product, service, all that sort of stuff. And they lead all that. It's not the teacher's idea. It's not the teacher's job to drive it. It's the student's job to drive it. And that's really, really powerful. And they get that. We make that very, very clear from the outset. And then really importantly, how they're going to tell their story. And so that's that 10-stage learning journey. It's really, really supported. So that's a big thing that we've identified. It can't be just a light touch thing. So here you go, teacher, away you go. You should know how to go with this. The big thing about this is it's a partnership. Students need support, teachers need support, schools need support. So we play a really big role in helping them along that journey. Because we talk about creating a fail-safe environment, and it's really important to encourage young people to take risks. And it's okay if it doesn't work. But if I asked all of you that, and if I asked you, would you be okay with trying something and it not working and it failing in your work context? Would that be okay with you? Don't know, it'd be a bit tricky. So we acknowledge that. But we all know that is where the beautiful learning comes into play, when students are allowed to make mistakes, learn from their mistakes. And we definitely take an active learning cycle approach to that. So the outcomes of all this, we come back to capabilities, whatever those capabilities may be, and all of this is mapped to curriculum as well. These are the 4 things that we've found it's really successful in our approach to entrepreneurial learning pathways. This is a proven process to cultivating these capabilities. Big word there, cultivating. Think about your garden. I know what my garden's like when I just leave it alone and think it's going to do its best on its own. Doesn't actually do that well. You really need to put some effort into this. And it's about creating the right environment for things to grow. So really looking at giving the students a chance to develop skills. So they get introduced to them, and then they get a chance to actually learn about them. And they get a chance to practice those skills. And they get a chance to demonstrate they're actually getting their head around this and they're getting the hang of it. And then they get the chance to deploy their skills. So they're out on their own. And this is kind of like me with my daughter right now on her L plate. She got her L's 2 weeks ago, and giving her a chance to do that driving the car. And I'm really, really scared about that. So I just share that with the whole group. But this is that chance. Like anything, it's the same context as sport. Exactly the same thing. You don't get really good at something in sport unless you've got that chance to practice it. You go out on game day and you play the game. Now, that are the outcomes. What's the impact? And the impact sometimes is pretty tricky to actually get our head around. So this is just a little case study around Jordan, who was a young Indigenous fellow from Wangaratta. And his idea was to create socks that had an Indigenous pattern on them that he created. Now, Jordan, he was off the rails. He was completely disengaged with school. He was at his, I think, 5th school, and he in himself didn't really think he had any future. And most of the people around him didn't think he had a future. He was in trouble with the law. It was looking pretty dire for him. The very first time we introduced social enterprise to him, he couldn't give a toss about it. It's like, I don't care, don't want to be here, whatever. But it wasn't until one afternoon he was running through the bush on a run, and a goanna jumped out of a tree onto the track and scared the hell out of him. And once he caught his breath, he's gone, oh my gosh, goanna, that's my totem. Wow, okay. And he went home and he drew the goanna. That's that drawing, the very first prototype. And he didn't know what he was going to do with it, but he brought it back to his teacher, who's sitting next to him there with the sun is on, and said, I don't know, this happened last night and I want to do something with it. I want to put it on some socks, but I don't know how to make socks. And the teacher said, I don't know how to make socks either. Let's find someone who makes socks. You've done all the hard work. It's about your design. And he put those design on his socks and he made her socks. And I wear those socks virtually every week. I love it. They're amazing. I need more pairs. They're starting to wear out. He was selling them for $25 a pop. Now, his social cause was supporting Indigenous homelessness in his hometown of Shepparton. Now, he didn't really give a toss about capabilities development. The impact for him was that this had unearthed a hidden talent, and he discovered this creativity in him, and it helped him harness that creativity and do something with it. Really importantly, it helped him with his pride and his self-esteem, and helped him play a role in his community, and he can contribute back into that community that he really, really cares deeply about. And really importantly, it was a proof point for him that he could create his own work. And I'll never forget the day he said to me, I know I'm going to be okay now, because if I can do this, he's making money. He's making a lot of money. In social enterprise schools, I should add, all the profits go to the social cause. It's a not-for-profit social enterprise. But he was able to demonstrate to himself, wow, I can actually create my own work. I'm going to be okay. And so it really shifted that belief in himself. So that's the impact on one individual, one of over 4,000 young people we've worked with over the last 7 years. Now, that's why we do this. And just lastly, this is pretty tricky just to do on your own. When we're trying to achieve a system change like this, and a system change in education and across community, it shouldn't be just left up to the schools. It shouldn't just be left up to an individual. So how can we work with community partnerships? And the Inner North Len is a classic example. I know many of the schools here today have already got a relationship with the Len. And the Lens across the state play a really critical role in being able to bring community and give schools access to community and industry. And we just got to continue to find ways to do this. And for us in the Northeast, it's the Northeast Tracks, NE Tracks Len. And they came to us and flagged, look, we would like, because they needed some help. They knew they've got a role to play with schools, but they didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So how can we bring something that's really innovative? And for them in their particular patch, it was really important to look at how they could address the lack of aspiration in young people, which is a sentiment I'm hearing more and more and more from educators and communities. And so that's what we've been working on with them over the last 3 years, how we can actually provide access to social enterprise schools to some of those small regional schools. So we do this right across urban settings, right across Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, in Central Australia, with Indigenous communities, flexible learning centres, you name it. We've done this with literally grade 1 to grade 6 students. It's incredibly effective. So I just wanted to share our experience with you today, and we're really proud of what we're able to achieve and what we hope to continue to achieve. And hopefully it sets the scene for some creative thinking amongst you all today as well. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks very much, Peter, for that. We've got another speaker before we take a break. That's Frank Wyatt. Frank's going to talk about iGen Foundation. Frank's had a pretty vibrant sort of career. He was responsible for the first enterprise education school over in South Australia, setting that up so that they had the students there had the entrepreneurial enterprise skills, and also being able to solve problems that they either had personally or saw around them. He's got diverse interests. He's been chair of a board of a winery over in South Australia, which if you live in South Australia, you're almost certain to get that job at some stage, given the amount of wine that's generated over there. He works as an expert in residence at La Trobe University Accelerator Program. He also provides strategic advice to enterprising partnerships and entrepreneurs roundtables, etc. He's going to talk about iGen Foundation, which is a registered charity with a commitment to cultivating entrepreneurship by young people, migrants, and regional communities. And as I said, he's whilst Pete's been working with the and his organisation, the Academy, working with primary and secondary, Frank's focus is sort of the 15 to 30-year-olds, still young people, and he's going to tell you more about that. Please make him welcome, Frank Wyatt.
Safety barriers. Thank you, and thank you for coming out to listen to us on such a cold day. It's wonderful to see you. And let me also acknowledge our Indigenous elders, the first entrepreneurs on this land, if you think about it. They were trading well and truly before the whites arrived, and they knew how to do this stuff well and truly. And we don't acknowledge the things that they do often enough in our acknowledgement of country. And that, to me, in this context, is really important. I'm going to talk about enabling kids to start a business. But I've got to tell you that starting a business is not for every kid. But an entrepreneurial mindset is for every kid. Let me just think that in a minute. Starting a business is not for every kid, but an entrepreneurial mindset is for every kid. So let me tell you the story as to how we got involved. I was working in the 19... I'm going to give away my age here. You can tell with the white hair. Back in the 1980s, in Salisbury in South Australia, particularly in Salisbury North, which is probably, in comparison, a bit like Heidelberg West. No? Tough area. Bodies in the barrels, murders area. Give you context. I knew every one of those kids who were killed along the way, and because you got to work with communities and you knew the critical families and the relationships that were there. We had a high school called Salisbury High School that was built for 2,000 kids. It, at that stage, had 210 kids in school. We were very fortunate that Lynn Arnold was the local premier and the local member, because the department was about to close the school. And I said to the premier, you cannot take the only infrastructure in this community away from that community. It is, the swimming pool's the only other facility that's actually in that community. And that's where the bikies hung out and, had a little brawl between them over the girls in the neighbourhood. It was just, that was the context that we were dealing with in those neighbourhoods. Street balls were every Friday night. They closed off John Street at both ends and the bikies went for each other. One of my questions that I was asked during my interview for the job is, how good are you at working with bikies? Ever had that question asked of you in a job interview? I had no idea what to say. I said, yes, of course. I wanted the job. I learned quick. But I was sitting at my desk one day and we had a quite large youth team, and a Catholic priest walked into my office, which was a bedroom in an old house, right? So it was a small room. Big bloke, and he lifted his foot up and slammed it on my desk, and I won't use quite the language he used, but he said, what are you doing about unemployment? I'm sick of burying kids. I've buried the 10th one today, this week. Right? The tears were in his eyes, the passion was in his heart, and he knew that what we were doing was wrong. And I say wrong because it's a more powerful word than what we were doing wasn't working. That's weak. He said what we were doing was wrong. We needed to change what we were doing. And so we had to go and look for somewhere in the world that actually had better solutions than what we had. And I found them in Merseyside, in Liverpool, a little place called Merseyside Youth into Business. Tiny little organisation that had some fantastic young people there doing really, really interesting things. And so our stories are very similar. Matt in the Northeast and I had very similar experiences as to why we came to this understanding as to what we needed to do. And there's not a word of what Peter said today that I disagree with, not a single word. So I'm not going to try and repeat a lot of what he said, because I think that would be wasting the scarce time we've got. I'm going to try and give you a context, except that my computer's just closed down, so I'll have to do it up here. That's all right. I started off needing to earn a quid. I'd left teaching in the northeast of Victoria. There was an interim period and it ended up in Adelaide, where I got this job in local government as a community worker, first community development officer ever employed in South Australia. I really quickly understood that you couldn't actually do community development work without having an economic development framework. You had to find an economic solution to some of the issues that you were dealing with within the community. And I tried to find that for young people as much as older people. I knew that that school was a fantastic infrastructure, but it was not being used. The principal was asleep at the desk. And I say this gently, but fortunately he died at the desk. And we were able to change the principal. It's now a school that's zoned and kids are proud to go to it. Previously, nobody went to that school if you could avoid going to that school. Right? It adopted an entrepreneurial mindset, and we taught entrepreneurial education back in the 80s. We were doing this work, so it's not new. Right? My private company, Enterprise Partnerships, then was doing consulting work around other matters, but we were paying for social enterprise initiatives and for-purpose activities around the place. 15 to 18% of our net earnings after tax, in other words, always went into doing for-purpose activities. And that often meant that our staff did those activities somewhere. Right? I went on to try, when I came to Melbourne, to try and establish a similar type of arrangements here. It was a little more difficult under our private company, partly because of the rise of social enterprise. And there was this sense that social enterprise was the white side of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship in its own right was still black, badly scarred by some nasty characters using the skills in the wrong way. But we then set up our own not-for-profit called the iGen Foundation. It's a play on words if you think about it. The innovation generation, the internet generation, you can use the I for whatever you like, really. But it was a group of businessmen who came together and said, we actually want to support young people. And we want to actually encourage this entrepreneurial mindset in young people in such a way that they can use that entrepreneurial mindset in whatever context they find themselves. Even if you're unemployed, you can still be entrepreneurial. You know, you can still find ways to find solutions to the things that you're experiencing. And that was the critical dimension that underpinned everything that we did. And so this foundation was established for this purpose. We also do another stream within this foundation, which is all about interculturalism, making sure that we don't just end up with siloed multicultural groupings, but finding ways to blend those cultures in a transdisciplinary type of way. You know, you can't have an intercultural community without having a multicultural community in the first place. And so everything that we do in all of our entrepreneurial programs is also intercultural. So we blend groups together in such a way. And you just think about it, if you've got a group of 3 people sitting at the same table, like, you know, a group of 4 people sitting at the same table, every one of these 4 people here are from different ethnic backgrounds. The chances are the businesses that they're running are likely to be for businesses from their own community. So they're trading into their own community rather than trading beyond their own community in the main. Get those 4 people to mix with each other and start to collaborate with each other, you've just quadrupled their market because they're then trading with each other's markets. Right? And so incrementally, there's a fundamental principle in interculturalism. It enables growth. That's part of our practice. And so that's the other thing that we try to do. Thank you for the next slide. We were classified at one stage by somebody who said that we're Australia's most successful youth entrepreneurship program. I probably wouldn't claim that anymore because there's other people who are doing some fantastic stuff around the place. But fundamentally, our stuff is done online or in person. My daughter taught me how to go online because she's the educator for Zoos Victoria, and they shifted rapidly onto online. If anybody's been taking their kids onto online for Zoos Victoria, she's the one who ran that. So she embarrassed me into getting online. But we were doing lots of stuff. This is actually in Manapara, in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. working with a group of kids up there that we were asked to come into to South Australia to do. And we fly over every couple of days to actually run that program. Thank you. I think we may have just skipped the slide. Yeah, the one on the right. Sorry, I think we do two slides at once. Okay, so the capabilities of iGen, we partner with other organisations like LENS around Australia and local government and community organisations and you name it. And we run programs that they want to run for young people looking at entrepreneurship. So we work with them to develop bespoke programs that are unique to their community and their group of kids and their context, and we develop those accordingly. So we're all over the place, including internationally these days, because we made a strategic decision to recruit a lot of our facilitators from the Swinburne Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. Little do we realise, of course, a lot of those people end up, their visas run out, and so they've got to go home. So the advantage of that was that they took our business with them. So we've now got branches in Colombia and Mexico, Botswana and Thailand and wherever. And so we're running programs through them back in their countries of origin. And I got to tell you, the problems that young people have here in Australia are exactly the same as what they've got in Botswana at the end of the day. They're still trying to work out how to actually create a quid to survive, and entrepreneurial skills and capabilities for what to do that. So I'll skip the IYE Accelerator for a minute. We run a mentorship program, which I know that Len has, and we've been talking today about perhaps sharing and collaborating with each other. Around young people, most young people who come into community, into entrepreneurship, their networks are their Facebook group or their TikTok group or whatever it is. They're not very useful to them in terms of business. And so we build business networks around people. So I'll come back now to the IYE. IYE is invest in a young entrepreneur. It's a play on words again. We ask private companies to invest in the establishment of entrepreneurial programs for young people. So I hit them up for $2,000, and on that basis, I can pay for the coaches. Our facilitators are my mates who are experts in marketing or sales or whatever. So I looked around my mentoring team and thought, I've got all these skills in the mentoring team. Why aren't I using them for other than mentoring? You know, there's a whole lot of really skillful people in my team. So I invited them to give me one day a year to deliver a workshop for these young people. And they all said, yeah, sure, you know, we're in. So it's just a matter of tapping back in. And so the Invest in the Young Entrepreneurs is a 6-month program, one Saturday per month. We deliver it in the CBD. 15 young people, because that's what we can afford. And it's business leaders come in from all over the place, and we build all types of networks around those kids in such a way that we're still working with last year's group and the year before that. In fact, the 2014, 2017 cohort that we put through, we're still working with most of them these days. So it's an ongoing relationship you have with young people, because it's a lifetime commitment that we give to them, not just a one-off program. They don't pass through us and then disappear. We're engaged with them ongoing forever. So, you know, similarly to Peter, we have a story of a young guy who came to me from a teacher in Stall, in fact, rang me up and said, look, this kid's been kicked out of school. Everyone thinks he's a bum. But there's something about him. And I can't put my finger on it, but I think there's something more to him that the school's actually measured. Can you help him? Anyway, yeah, bring him in, we'll get him involved in the program. So he came along. I think it took us about 3 weeks to work out that this kid had been writing books and publishing them on Amazon. How to take your son fishing, how to train your dog. These are little books, you know, selling for $2 a hit. He eventually got his mentor to write his own biography. Well, he's eventually gone back to school. He's just recently finished his master's in education at Melbourne University. Having come through our program, he relearned how to go back into school and what he could actually do and establish himself. And that's a common story with us. Lots of kids come through us and, you know, they're dissociated from school, but they come to us and then they come back in again as part of the process because they've now got a sense of purpose, they've got a sense of self, they've got a sense of self-worth. If you're a country kid and you're not playing football as a male or netball as a female or whatever it might happen to be, you know, and you haven't got a job or you're not at school, then you're likely to kick in a window just to get noticed. Right? Your behaviour is, please notice me. I'm screaming for acknowledgement. So what we do is create that sense of purpose and process whereby kids get noticed. Kids get a sense of self and purpose, and then they can find their way back in again. Right? And we help them in that journey. That's part of it. So next slide, thank you. So let me just give you a couple of snapshots of what we do. We run and you know, these are all customizable, right? So these are things that we've actually designed for clients as part of it. Maribyrnong community asked us to run a 1.5 hour workshop because they didn't think the kids would stay for any longer than 1.5 hours. You know, kids were there for about 4 hours, as it turned out. But you know, that was just the self-belief that was governing their perception of those young people. So we designed a 1.5 hour workshop for 15 people. 15 young people, and it was an explorer workshop about how to take a business to market, etc. We also ran a longer one, which is a 3-hour workshop. We did that up in Swan Hill just before Christmas, and developed an ideation workshop there using an ideation format where they created a business idea, and then we put them through a process of evaluating that business idea using a set of tools that we've got as part of it. We've got some proprietary opportunity analysis tools that we've developed in conjunction with Swinburne. The next slide, thank you. We've got a 7-hour workshop to assist young people to test the viability of their business idea. That is a really intensive 1-day session where they actually bring in and we put them through a rigorous testing process of that business idea. They'll then decide what they do next with that process. And invariably they go on to join a 2-day workshop or, you know, 2-week program, or they'll join the 6-month accelerator, et cetera, as part of that process as a schedule. I'm getting a wind up. Next slide, please. We've been doing this for 30 years in one way or another, and we love it because we love working with young people. And I have given up my private company. As Peter said, I'm now the strategic advisor to the, not the managing director, to the company, and they just call me in when they need me. And I'm running this type of stuff rather than the other because I get to choose these days. Thank you. Next slide. Just to give you an idea, some of the young people that have gone through the program. Top left corner, went back to Botswana just recently because his father dropped dead and he was running a factory in Botswana and he needed to be there to look after his mum. He rang me up and said, I'm going to stay because Dad's business has got some possibilities. It's been pretty run down, but I reckon I can get it going again, given the skills and capabilities. Okay, what do you need? So we've been pouring capability into him in running that business. So we've now got manufacturers working with him, assisting that, some process engineers working with him around that. Next one along the line works at Moreland Council as a senior officer at Moreland Council. Young woman runs a hydronics company in Albury, Hicks Hydronics. You may know Hicks Hydronics from up the northeast. Next is a guy who discovered that the hospitality facilities in the Yarra Valley didn't have clean sheets, or had to come down to Melbourne to get them for their facility. So he set up Yarra Linen. He developed that program through one of our programs, just put the business idea up and then progressively built it up as a business, running a very successful business. Next guy down the line has just sold his business for $1.5 million. It was a tutoring business in schools. Learn, mate. Woman who's next to it, just come back from Ukraine, where she's been driving resources into the Ukrainian community during the war. She's Ukrainian by background, but she also runs a window company, window manufacturing company down in Carrum Downs. Guy next to it, Harry Sanders. I met Harry sleeping under a bridge when I first met him. He was sleeping next to a swag, and I asked him what his story was, and he told me that he was sleeping rough, bit of a hard time. I invited him into our program. His business is probably worth now about $40 million. He's the world's best search engine optimization consultant. Harry Sanders is his name. He's in New York at the moment, opening a New York office. Next woman is a young woman who runs her own social enterprise. I'll keep going, you know, just the stories go on. So thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to you. Our presentations, I can't speak for Peter. My presentation will be available to you. You can read the words in more detail. Thank you.
All right. Yes, there will be the slide shows from both our presenters will be available, and they'll be sent to you as participants today. They'll also be on the Youth Enterprise Hub website as well. And that's part of the hub, that idea of having resources that people can tap into if it meets the needs that they've identified within their organisation. Just a couple of takeaways from me before we take a break there. I thought with Pete, it's never, they're never too young to start work with on this. I think that's really important. And also those stages and steps that he mentioned, although there can still be flexibility, like goanna moments can occur. So there were two. And then when Frank was just speaking out, I think the important thing that not everyone's going to be an entrepreneur, but having an entrepreneurial mindset and a set of those skills and qualities that underpin that is important for everybody. And the other key point, I think, was about that longitudinal, you know, rather than it being, oh, it happens and then you move on, you know, following people through. One, to perhaps support the success that they can have. The other thing is tapping into what they can contribute to other people along the way as well. All right, so in terms of questions, we're up to morning tea time. So I reckon you can target Pete and Frank during the break if you didn't have the opportunity to ask them a question right now. We'll be back at 11 to hear about some of the things that have been happening in the hub, and then we'll draw things together by the lunch. So I hope so far it's worked well for you. Continue to have chats and enjoy the morning tea that's set up for you. We'll be back in 15 minutes. Speaking of which, our next speaker is the Executive Officer of the Inner North Local Learning and Employment Network, David Kennedy. David's been involved in local government, university, not-for-profits over a period of time. He's been Executive Officer of the land for quite some time. And he's going to talk about the Youth Enterprise Hub and some of the things that have been happening there. So, David, over to you.
Thanks very much, Peter. It's good to be here today just to be able to share some of the work of the Youth Enterprise Hub over the last 4 or 5 years. So before I begin, I just actually acknowledge the work that Viv Sercombe did for the INLEN in setting up the hub. And it has been a long process. Obviously, throwing COVID into the mix has been a challenge for everybody. But through that process, there's been some innovation, which is what you sort of expect, is that, you know, things happen and you've got to pivot and change the way you do things. Just in terms of slides, I might just jump through, Brett. Yep. So just in terms of this, this logo that we developed some time ago, it really does we've tried to represent what the hub concept is about. And, you know, I'll start with partnerships. And I think our previous 2 speakers today, Peter and Frank, sort of talked about building the ecosystem and building partners, building community. I think the essence for the LEN is that you can't actually support young people by yourself. You actually need a whole bunch of people to come together actually to help young people to get better transition or better outcome for themselves. So I start with partnerships with this work. And over the past 4 years, we've tried to build a whole bunch of partners to support schools to actually be able to work with young people in the youth entrepreneurship space. Some of the other things I think are obviously pretty obvious. We're trying to work with schools. So the remit for the LEN is to improve education, training, employment outcomes for young people. And the bulk of our focus is actually in school. So if you want to work in school, I think what we've found over the journey is you obviously have to engage people in school and add value to what they're doing. So these models that we've tried to develop are actually got a curriculum base to them, so that they're actually you're able to embed the work in the school's structures. So I think what we found, and I think I'm sure other people would agree with this, is that if you try to work with schools and actually just bring in things that are not sort of embedded, they will disappear if those relationships disappear. What we're trying to do here is actually embed through curriculum and through VCAL, that's the model that we've tried to use, an approach where we build the capabilities of schools and community organisations to work with one another around youth entrepreneurship. The other component, so the capacity building stuff's really important. It's actually capacity building of schools, capability building of young people, and capabilities around partnering. The other thing around resources, if you jump onto our website around the Youth Enterprise Hub, there's some resources on there, curriculum pieces as well as connections. Some of the things that you've heard today from ACRE and from iGen, they're resources that we'll also try and put up on our website, because we think at the end of the day, the project that we're running isn't just about running a program. We actually think that it's important that there's lots of different opportunities out there. So some schools may be interested in taking up the offer from ACRE, for example. The work that iGen's doing may be part of a transition piece around kids that have actually been through some of these programs. So that whole thing around resources is really, really important. I'm just going to jump through to the next slide. And so in terms of, I suppose what we've really tried to offer here is we're trying to enable teachers, innovators, and young people opportunity to research, create and develop social environmental innovations for their local community. And these are not dissimilar to what ACRE's doing. In actual fact, it's exactly the same. Exactly the same. You know, we're basically saying that the new economy, you know, and it's interesting, you know, we're talking about environmental sustainability, social responsibility, etc. It's when we started out 5 or 6 years ago, this stuff was probably slightly to the left and a bit foreign. But in that time period, it's actually straight in the middle of the bullseye. Young people, I think Peter Sacco said, young people are actually talking about the environment, and we all know that. They talk about the environment, talk about sustainability, social awareness, etc. Next slide, thank you. So in terms of the role of the hub, and this is quite an interesting one. People sort of go, when we set this up, people sort of going, well, where's the hub? I was sort of expecting, you know, a paradigm was that the hub was some sort of physical thing. The hub is actually everyone sitting in this room. The hub is a virtual connection of anyone interested in youth enterprise in the inner north of Melbourne. And so at the end of the day, what we're trying to do, or have been trying to do, is build the ecosystem, build the partners, and actually just build a system that actually is interested in this space. So in terms of the role of the hub, part of it is around coordination. So trying to coordinate that work, running professional development. And Viv ran, for the first 2 years, ran quite a lot of professional development with schools. And it was really road testing ideas. That was the concept. We didn't actually start out and say, we want to build a program. Because often that's what happens. You go, okay, problem, program, end of, sort of solution. We actually spent quite a bit of time unpacking this piece of work with schools and partners, and then came up with a couple of curriculum pieces. And so, sharing curriculum across, and I will actually get Louise from Fitzroy High School to talk a little bit in a minute about some of the experiences of being involved in the hub. The other thing we have done is we've had mentors involved, and so we've actually recruited and trained mentors. We've also linked schools and social enterprises together as part of this project, and we'll also hear from social enterprises today as well about that experience. The other, I think Frank mentioned Slack channels, communication channels. Viv did set up a Slack channel. So that whole sharing of information is really, really critical about the work. I might actually ask Alex, Louise, to just make a bit of commentary around how you've utilised the hub and what your sort of thoughts are about it. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, for us, we've been involved in I've just your previous, right? So for us, it has that technical coordination that being more technical. So being able to connect other schools, but also being able to do with the land. So even just 5 minutes ago, I had a conversation about our upcoming project, and just being able to bounce to what we're doing in terms of how we implement all of it, how much is different this year, and what that means for the program. Was just really valuable. So that just quick 5-minute conversation was useful. Have I not got a loud enough voice? Pardon? Oh, sorry. Sorry. What do I do? There. Sorry. God, I've got a teacher voice. I thought that was fine. Yeah, PD, I'll be super quick. PD, we've obviously been involved from the beginning, and it was really useful for me to understand concepts of social enterprise and entrepreneurship and what that might mean for my kids. We were involved in creating curriculum with Sydney Road Community School, which was useful, just sitting down. We had a day where we sat down and mapped this program against VCAL outcomes. Mentors have obviously been amazing, just bringing that external component to the program, and they seem to bring credibility into the classroom that for some reason I don't have with my kids. Even though I have the business experience, it doesn't matter, I'm a teacher. So we're gonna, but it's actually really useful to have that in. And obviously being able to visit the social enterprises and having those links. And as David said, the Slack platform was an amazing platform just to keep that comms going throughout the program. Did you want me to? No,
that's good. I'll get you to make some more comments in a sec, but just move. Yeah, that's the right slide. So in terms of the relevance to schools, I mean, it was interesting hearing Peter Sacco's presentation this morning around the Enterprise Academy. The work's actually very similar. In actual fact, I'd probably say it's almost identical. And it's been developed in isolation from one another, which is, I think, not a great thing. I think the essence of partnerships and reinventing the wheel is that there's lots of stuff happening across Victoria in this space. And I think the more that we actually can share models and ideas with one another, the better it will be for young people. Because I think the vision for the lens for this work is that every school, and I think Peter had a slide there about literacy and numeracy and entrepreneurship skills. Every school in our region should be doing something in this space. And, so at the end of the day, our role, I think, as part of the hub is to actually make it as easy as possible for that to happen. So, and that's the role of the LEN, the facilitator, the broker. And I think also I'll take another comment from Peter Sacco was, you're actually got to make this stuff simple enough for people to be able to understand it and actually implement it. If it's too complex, it actually won't happen. So we've got to sort of bring it down and make it accessible for people as well. But just in terms of, the whole notion of student agency and student-led initiatives, that is the essence of this work. That is a diversion from the education system of the past. It's a different pedagogy, it's a different way of learning. And I think for some teachers, it's quite challenging because you actually have to give up the control of the classroom. You actually have to hand it over to young people to actually go through that process of developing ideas, etc. But in terms of just some of the other stuff, the 21st century skills, Peter Hilly mentioned earlier on, are they new skills or are they just the same skills put into a different context in the 21st century? The real world connections. I think the concept of going out to industry, social enterprises, and actually having a look, having a touch, feel, and actually talking to people about what's going on in the real world is really, really important part of this work. And I think the social awareness, the connection to social enterprise pretty much brings that straight to the fore, because I think the founders and the people working in social enterprise are actually there for that purpose. They're actually there to say, and I think it's that why are we doing this stuff? And it's the same for young people. If they're going to go through this process, it's the same idea is why they're going to do this stuff. The other stuff that we're talking about here is collaboration, and that could be collaboration with partners, but I think for young people, it's actually working in teams. So some of this 21st century skill stuff is working together in collaboration in classrooms to actually get better outcomes. Louise, I might just ask you, like in terms of your projects, have you got any sort of thoughts around the student agency piece, the real world learning sort of stuff as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're just kicking off a new program this year, and last year was the first time that I ran this with a group of Year 12 VCAL students. So can you flip back again, just so that I've got some prompts? Thank you. Certainly from an applied learning pedagogical perspective, it's just an amazing program because this is applied learning in action, and particularly if you can let go of the reins. Obviously, you're still there as a kind of facilitator, but just watching the way students built relationships with mentors was really pretty special. To the point where when the students, they created final pitch presentations at the end last year, and without me prompting them in any way, the mentors, when they put their team slides up and they all gave each other, like corporate titles, finance manager and what have you, the mentor was always involved in that. So they had the mentor up there as, chief innovation officer or something. They kind of made up these titles, which was really good. But yeah, just getting and talking to the kids about their reflections on their development of 21st century skills, the agency that they had in their learning, the social awareness that they've built throughout the program, their ability to network. The final pitch was in collaboration with a number of local schools. Even though it was online, it still felt that we were part of a community. So it was really lovely. And it's interesting this year to have a totally different lot of kids with different skills, a different relationships, a different dynamic in the classroom, and then thinking about what this might look like for that new cohort and how I can rejig things is going to be a good semester next semester, I think. We're doing it again. Yeah.
Thank you. That's good. Just flick through. Just got to look. Louise just mentioned, through COVID, some of this work was done online. And, in an ideal situation, I mean, it's very, there are probably some challenges that it threw up. But just anecdotally, I mean, there was some feedback sort of came through that with some of the sessions, the cameras were off. And as things progress, the cameras were on. And so, the cohorts of kids that we worked with across the project, we actually had quite a broad range of settings. It wasn't just mainstream high school, it was actually quite a range of settings. And I think that in itself, just young people engaging in this work through COVID was probably for me, was probably the big outcome in terms of it was actually something they found to be positive and something they wanted to engage with. Because we all know, like, COVID was hard. I think, you know, it was hard for us. So if you're a young person, it must have had a multiplier effect on it.
My class had 100% attendance throughout this program. There were still a few cameras on to start with, but they did eventually. That was a confidence more than anything else. I don't think it was like engagement, more about the confidence there and bringing outsiders. But yeah, 100% in that class was pretty special. I think that's
Absolutely. Just jump through another. Oh, no, we're up to. Actually, yeah. So just in terms of, we talk about curriculum. When we set out on this project, we actually wanted to develop curriculum, and we actually ended up doing 2 curriculum pieces. One was the large-scale curriculum, and this micro enterprise unit was the second component, which came about because COVID actually blew us up. So what really happened was Sydney Road Community School was involved in the project. They were actually doing youth enterprise work. They're also doing another mentoring program called Mentoring Matters. And both programs were virtually not going to happen because of the COVID situation, lockdowns. So between Rochelle Darby, who's the Pathways Manager for LEN, or Transitions Manager for LEN, and Sydney Road Community School and Viv, we actually managed to sort of pivot and create a smaller micro enterprise unit, which basically we brought mentors into the mix. And from there, the following year, so 2021, the 3 or 4 schools that are involved in the hub actually have run a pilot around this micro enterprise work. And basically the work, you know, was around, in quite practical, you know, go out, as I said, going out and visiting social enterprises as part of that journey. And obviously we went through the whole iteration of ideas and prototypes, etc. Students created a service product, and then obviously did a pitch around that. I suppose the big change or one of the big wins, I suppose, was bringing the mentors into the space. And I think all of the schools agree that having external people to work with who have expertise, you know, current expertise, motivations, and skills was a bit of a game changer. So for us, we've committed from the LEN to actually keep that mentoring component going through the vocational mentoring exchange, and we see that as something that we can continue to work on in the future. Just the very last slide I've got is just some of the evaluation stuff from that micro enterprise unit. It's basically, if you just see there, like, and this was delivered through sort of COVID haze. So 6% of students reported significantly better understanding of entrepreneurship, and working with mentors, 7% said very or extremely helpful, and then 47% thought the content was interesting, and 53% thought the content was quite interesting. So, and very, very last slide, and I think I really need to just acknowledge the funding partners. So with this piece of work, over the whole duration, the 4 or 5 years, we've been trying to cobble together funding to make this happen. And basically, I really just thank the Bendigo Bank, the National Disability Insurance, ILC funding, Inner North Community Foundation, and obviously state government for funding to actually keep this work going. I might just hand back to Peter, and we've got a couple of other speakers who are going to add a bit more to this conversation.
Please, thank David.
It was arranged with our sponsors that they'd get 2 mentions. You thanked twice, so it's fine. David, thanks. And Louise, thank you too for those insights on the experience at Fitzroy and Warren College. All right. This is now referring to another part of what the LEN and the Hub have been involved in recent times. Our next speaker is Julie Mackay, who runs Enable Social Enterprises. She's had a a long career in management and executive experience across manufacturing, consulting, wholesale, retail, not-for-profit, federal and state governments. She's worked for Scope, Mission Australia, and she's committed to social justice, finding new and innovative ways to support the disadvantaged community. She founded Enable Social Enterprises to provide disadvantaged job seekers with on-the-job experience through supportive work and learning programs. The not-for-profit's aim is to break unemployment cycles for disadvantaged job seekers. Julie's done some work with Concord, one of the inner north schools, and she's going to talk to us about Enable Social Enterprises and her experience. Thanks, Julie. She may well also refer to Megan Prance, who is from Concord School and worked closely with Julie on the program.
Well, I feel a little bit like Dickie Knee here, so I'm going to move off to the side. There we go. Awesome. Well, look, it's wonderful to be here this morning, and thank you very much for having Enable involved in the hub. There's obvious links for, you know, what the hub's all about, with its ethical, social and green sort of approach to entrepreneurial learning. And with Enable in particular, we operate in that same space. So we're a social enterprise operating in Broadmeadows. So we're a not-for-profit based social enterprise, focusing on work and learning opportunities for young people with disability predominantly. Now, in the context of what we do, we're a work integration social enterprise, we're an intermediate labour market social enterprise, we're a transitional labour market social enterprise. Doesn't matter really what you call us, but we provide pathways for young people to, at the start, focus on employability skills, then to look to pathways to employment, either with Enable or to other training, further training, whether it be TAFE or a Cert 1 or a Cert 2. And then with the views to getting jobs in open employment. So we've worked to date with over 1,000 participants since 2016, which is, Sydney, wonder I'm tired after that intro as well, with all that, the CV as well. It's been a long journey to get here, but certainly the industries that we operate in, I think it's an important correlation from this morning's speakers around entrepreneurial learning and economic development. So this is what we do. Social enterprises are entrepreneurial or innovative by nature. And it's really important for us as social enterprise to make sure that there's those linkages to jobs, whether it be inspiration to become self-employed, or whether it's you know, careers in certain particular industries. So Enable was based on not we're going to, you know, start and run a cafe, or we're going to start and do, you know, packaging, those sorts of type of thing. It was based on, we want to operate in industries that are stable and growing, that provide jobs of now and jobs of the future, which is really important for the guys. So hence we landed in fair square in the middle of online retailing, which is obviously quite prevalent and important, particularly with COVID, this COVID situation. We operate as asset decommissioning from corporates. They give us their old tech, and then we basically test it, repair it, refurb it, and then resell it. Hence, and then those linkages back to online learning. And then from that comes the pick, pack, dispatch, which is then transferable skills across to the warehousing and logistics industry as well. So there's a very important combination of industries that we operate in that provides the guys with lots of different ways. They could be tasters, they could be inspired by tech. I haven't met many young people that have come for a tour and not wanted to start because they just have a look around and see all the tech and they're like, gimme, you know, whether to rip it apart or whether you're actually, you know, putting it back together, testing it. But all of these systems and tools and processes that we use are recognisable in industry environments, so particularly for the IT. So the guys come out with all these sorts of things on their CVs, whether it's data sanitation, we use a system called Kildis that's widely recognised internationally. All of these systems and processes are recognisable by IT land, as I call it, which is terrific. So it acts as a genuine pathway through to those industry jobs. So when we were matched with Concord, obviously with the work we do with the young guys with disability, we were just so happy to be involved. So we were both mentor and social enterprise. because we understand that the learning needs are a little bit more diverse. And we also understand that that rigorous structure that you were talking about for those programs, it would work in some aspects, but not all aspects. So I'll invite Megan to come up to talk about the work that we did. But it sort of, we let it evolve as entrepreneurs do. You just let it evolve over time. And then we realised that the best way to make it happen was to design it in a way, so I'll come over this side now, design it in a way that, you know, it suited the needs of the guys, but also we ended up mentoring the teachers who then mentored the guys. So it's just a different approach to the same sort of outcomes. Pass it on to Megan.
Yeah, I guess like always, we've been involved since the onset of the program, and so we are different in that we are a special needs school. So our program is mapped to the foundation VCAL, not to the intermediate or senior. So we had to adapt all of the micro enterprise curriculum that was created, and we are currently also reusing it again with the VPC, which is really positive that it's very easily adaptable. In the beginning, we had mentors who came to teach to the students, and we really very quickly realised that that wasn't going to work for our kids. And we were so lucky to be matched with Julie, who was able to us. We had no industry experience, we had no idea what we were doing. And for us to say to Julie, help, what do we do? And so Julie would say, oh, this is what I think you should talk about. And then we would put it into language that was appropriate for our students. So Julie would come and talk to us, and we'd say, we need ideas about how to do this and how to do that. And she had just so much wealth of knowledge that she was able to pass on to us. She also then acted as a guest speaker for our students online.
Yeah, it's good fun.
She created videos that met the needs that we had. We have a pick, pack, dispatch video that our kids thoroughly enjoy and gained a lot from it. And we're able to grow some of our programs from that. So yeah, now we've actually finally been able to have a face-to-face tool, which has been still engaging. So even through COVID, no matter we've evolved and changed, and our partnership has been fantastic, and we wouldn't have had that without the hub. So it's been really, really valuable for us. And I'd also like to say that we had the same experience with our engagement with our students through COVID, that we had pretty much 100% attendance right through this program, which is quite outstanding. That's it, me.
That's it. Yeah, I'll just speak a little bit more about, you know, my experience with working with the school. I really felt that there was a strong, the co-design piece was really amazing. Like we were doing a lot of think tanking ourselves, you know, at the start and then during as well. But to come up with the end idea, which was the guys came up with a pop-up shop, if I recall, and online pop-up shop, and then focused on, was it Father's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, which, you know, is quite significant when you look at the retail landscape. I mean, pop-up shops are, you know, they're not going anywhere, and they'll come back with a vengeance. I've seen a few I'm a resident of Darebin, they're all popping up literally in High Street. So it's relevant skills to in this current environment that the guys can apply. Particularly for me, you know, putting your marketing hat on, having scripts for customer service, talking pricing, and, you know, what people would tolerate, what sold, what didn't sell, and why, the importance of feedback, and for the guys that are a bit shy, to give them just little tricks of the trade, as we call it, in things to remember about what do you do when you've got a customer in front of you. Well, we have to do something. So we just come up with some acronyms, which is the SAT acronym, I can't even say it properly, which is smile, ask, and thank. So it's just simple. So remember to smile. How awkward it is, it does not matter. Ask them, how can I help you? And then talk about the products, which they've studied and understand. And then, you know, thanks, and would you like a bag? No, you shouldn't have one because it's not good for the environment. Yeah, exactly. So look, it was just absolutely terrific to be involved. And we would be more than, I think have we committed again for next year? Yeah. All right. Tag team, brilliant. Glad to see that's going to happen.
It started last year with just a straight online environment for our Father's Day stall. Mother's Day stall this year was online and in person. And in that situation, we were like, Julie, help. And she was back there again straight away, able to help us immediately.
Yeah.
You know, just to give us the advice that we don't have as teachers. We're not experienced in running businesses. So yeah, it was just really good to have someone who you could just ask her the questions and get the answers you need, rather than trying to solve it yourself.
Yeah, no, and I think too that, that taster piece is, never underestimated, when the guys actually, I don't mind doing that. And they won't know until actually get into that environment and they start to say, well, look, I think I could go and work in, I think, I could go and work in retail and that could be cool and that sort of thing. And same with the tech as well. I just wanted to share one story with one of the participants. And I think that the power of social enterprise and the importance of social enterprise in this space where anything is possible. So let's follow a pathway from one of our current employees. So he came from Jackson School and he had a group, he was in a group work experience group. He absolutely loved it. He didn't like to speak very much. He'd been bullied quite heavily at school, so he was a selective mute. Very clever young man, and so within the group, he started dismantling the tech. He found that he really liked sorting the parts and commodities. This kid had a photographic memory. Like he knew everything. I still don't know what all the difference between the circuit boards, for goodness sake, right? It's really complex stuff. So he was really good at it. And then through talking with the teachers, and they're just like, oh my God, he loves it. And I'm like, well, let's make him the chief quality officer, right? Which is, I was laughing before about that. So we made him the chief quality officer, which meant then he had to engage with the other students to then talk about what you do with the different parts and commodities and where you put them. And he just started coming out of his shell. He then said, I want an SWL individual placement with Enable. So we did that. He was fortunate enough to get on that wave of the NDIS and the school leavers employment support. So he was able to get support through the NDIS. He did some placements through that provider with Enable as well. COVID hit, Enable was able to secure some government funding. Part of the prerequisites for that funding was to be a former participant of Enable. So we favoured the guys and recruited the guys. We got 6. He was one of them. 18 months later, he's still with us and he's just turned 21. So it's a great little story but that's the power of the social enterprise right from school through to where we are today. And it can happen when collaborations and the right combination of events through the schools, they start believing in themselves, they find something they like that they're passionate about, and they just get into this space where the world's my oyster, and it does happen. So we're just going to play a quick vid.
Enable is turning old technology into a valuable resource through employability programs for people who may experience significant barriers to employment. Enable seeks to break unemployment cycles while simultaneously tackling the environmental impacts of e-waste. E-waste is one of Australia's fastest growing waste types and is expected to grow by 85,000 tonnes by 2024.
Customers often ask us, what happens to our donated tech? Simply put, Enable can come and collect it, or some customers choose to drop it off. Once your tech arrives, it's batched and given a job number. This starts the process of full traceability. We report on each and every item we receive, so it can be fully traced through its final destination.
I test every piece of equipment and put it in our system called Test.
So what I'm doing here is dismantling e-waste and putting them to different parts and compartments so we can recycle them. We are trained with OH&S to be very careful with stuff like toners, batteries and glass, which is why we had to wear these safety goggles and these gloves.
Every hard drive we get is data wiped using commercial grade software called Kill Disk. Sometimes customers ask us to use the degaussing machine or the shredder to destroy their data.
Enable have a number of reuse strategies that also help the environment. We also retail affordable items in good condition on our eBay store. We also offer low-cost tech bundles to local disadvantaged communities, so your old tech goes to those in need. Once the customer's job is finished, asset reports and data destruction certificates are finalised. The waste goes to our accredited downstream recycling partners, completing our traceability process.
Enable is turning decommissioned and old technology into a valuable resource that creates positive social, environmental and economic impact.
The thing. So that first take in that video, it took me 9 times. I am the worst in front of a camera, right? And this is to go, and he wants to, young Stephen, he loves acting, and he took 1 take. I was watching, I'm like, oh my goodness me, mate, you're so good at this. He goes, yes, I want to be an actor. So anyway, I thought I'd leave you with that. But yes, playing to everyone's strengths, you know, watch what happens next. Cheers. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much indeed, Julie and Megan. Great program, and that'll continue and can happen in other places as well. We've got 3 more speakers to go prior to our lunch break. Community has come up in every time someone stood up here before, and this is another opportunity to see the connection with the hub work and the work, generally speaking, with young people. Bianca Pizzorno works at the Inner North Community Foundation, who are one of the great supporters of a lot of the inland programs. And her role there is as grants manager. I think it's something like about $500,000 a year distributed to 40 deserving causes across the Inner North. And one of the programs that's co-funded by the Inner North Community Foundation is the Young Changemakers program. And that's been running for 7 or 8 years. I was involved myself when the Community Bank first got involved in funding that fantastic program. Bianca's going to talk about that. Essentially, it's where kids get to choose where money should be invested in their community. And often social enterprises are about building community or repairing community, depending on the circumstance. So the Young Changemakers, Bianca's going to talk about that. And then I will have Tanil Gilbert up to talk about the For Change Company. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Bianca.
I just wanted to start off with acknowledging the Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation and the custodians of this land, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. May we continue to learn to walk in good relationship with this land and with each other and community. So today I will talk about the Young Changemakers program. Thanks, Peter. That was a great snapshot. And it provides leadership opportunities for young people in senior school. It's an adaptive program, which is adaptable to students of all abilities. And some of the schools that we've worked with in the past have been Fitzroy High School, which is now we're on campus, Collingwood College, Concord School, just to name a few. In this year, we're just wrapping up a semester program where we're working with NCAT and we're on campus. And across 4 classrooms, the students have distributed a total of $45,000 across 9 organizations. And some of those organizations basically focus on areas of food security, people seeking asylum and cold communities, young people on their journey to work, as well as people with disabilities, parents and their babies, young parents and their babies, as well as people living with disabilities, just to name a few. So the students undertake a semester-long program where they do a deep dive into their own values. So the first term is about understanding what values they have, what they care about, and collectively as a classroom, they identify those key values and agree to focus on investing in tackling some of the challenges in our community to impact the community in a better way. So they effectively, the classroom changes into a grants panel. So what that meant this year is that the students assessed a total of 15 grants applications. They not only did they do a lot of research, but they also had to debate. And from that, each classroom had to shortlist 3 organizations. And with that, they were able to meet those organisations. And one of the organisations who's going to talk afterwards is Tennille from For Change Co. So the students from Warren campus funded one of the programs there, which impacts young people who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. So with that, the students landed with the program and an opportunity to deep dive and inquiry about those points. I'm still wrapping up the efficacy of this semester's program, but from last year's program, which was quite adaptive in the pandemic, it was on Zoom half of the time. We found that 20%, there was an increase of 20% of students at the end of the program that strongly felt that people should contribute to their local community. And from that, an increase of 15% of those students as well in total felt that they were important to contribute to their community, which is quite a huge success. At 9:37 a.m. this morning, one of the assessments came through from Warren campus from one of the students. Miska from Warren campus wrote, "I like that the program gave the next generation the opportunity to respond to social and cultural issues." And that says a lot. We also welcome feedback that's unprompted. So we get a lot of that from the students. And I want to welcome Louise from Warren campus, who can share a little bit more about the insights and the research that some of their students did. Sure, come, join. Teacher voice.
Teacher voice. Eyes on me. As Bianca said, we're just wrapping this up, and what an amazing program it was last year, delivered remotely, but this year's just been so good. So my main involvement has been again with a Year 12 group, but I just point out that Miska, who Bianca referenced before, is one of our foundation students, and that comment is just so special from that student who just wouldn't have been able to even kind of articulate that a couple of months ago. So choking me up.
I'm so happy I read that evaluation before coming along.
Yeah, so that's really cool. Sorry, not sure where that came from. So for us, it's I've lost my train of thought now. One of the key things I think for us was actually going out and meeting the three shortlisted organisations that our group were involved with. And one of the really interesting things, and for me, again, coming back to that applied learning pedagogical framework, was just astounding, was that they had in class, we had decided how to split that 15K, and they were all fixed, and they had, really seemed to be quite inflexible around how they were going to split that $15,000. Then we went out and met the organisations, and it flipped it completely on its head. And part of that was one of the organisations that we were looking at. What they did was really tangible and easy for the kids to access, and it was something that was kind of, they could look and feel and touch and see. But when we actually spoke to the other organisations where things were a little less tangible, actually having those interactions and understanding from the horse's mouth, so to speak, what was actually going on, it just completely changed their perspectives, and they flipped around their funding. So that to me was extraordinary, to have that. And also not only to have that insight, but to have the autonomy to do that as a group of students was pretty amazing. So I'm not quite sure if that's what you're expecting from me. But yeah, fabulous. It's been a fabulous experience.
Yeah, no, thank you for teaching the program again this year, Louise. So some of the key points from the program. So it's mapped out to the VCAL curriculum. Prior to 2019, it was introduced in VC. And in collaboration with funding partners of Community Bank, Clifton Hill, North Fitzroy, as well as the Lens. So you are interested in the program and you want to find out more, I'll be sticking around if you have any questions. Not entirely, like it's not entirely certain whether or not this program will run next year, sort of finalising and welcoming funding partners. But yeah, however, if you're interested in the program, feel free to ask any questions. So thank you.
Very good, thank you. And thanks, Louise. I was involved in that Young Changers program in the first few years and worked with Fitzroy High, Alston High and Collingwood College with the 3 original schools. With a visitation, there was a flip side of that experience you had where the kids were pretty convinced that this particular organisation, but once they interviewed the CEO, they completely changed it. Since then, that organisation changed the CEO and is being funded on a more regular basis. So they can have influence, these kids. And they often make better decisions than some of the adult boards that get charged with doing that a lot. All right. Speaking about that community connection, which is really important in the program, Bianca's just spoke about, of course, that notion of philanthropy for life, giving something, whether it be your time or resources or ideas, is very, very important. And I think, again, a longitudinal view of some of the people who've been through that program over the years would be quite a useful thing to do. Privacy, accepted. All right, to Neil Gilbert from For Change Company, which is a family of social enterprises which support young people to be empowered to escape the cycle of homelessness, which would have been one of the things that no doubt is identified by some kids as, an important community issue. Janelle co-founded and she's managing director of the For Change Company. Focused on that, she's got a background in community development. She's studying her MBA and she believes, as just about every speaker said today, support young people to achieve their potential. So Janelle, we're keen to hear from you about that. Please make a welcome.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. So yeah, as was mentioned, my name's Janelle Gilbert. I'm the co-founder and managing director of For Change Co. Thank you. So I guess, yeah, in the spirit of an entrepreneurial approach, For Change Co definitely started in that way. So my co-founder, Dan Poole, and his brother were about 18 and 21 at the time, and they decided to just start rolling their crepe griddles out to St Kilda Beach and making some crepes. So they had a French background, knew how to do that, and kind of realized that they were making a little bit of a profit on the side. And growing up and living in St Kilda, really saw the issue of youth homelessness being quite prevalent, and decided that they would start donating the profits they were making to local organizations that were supporting young people at risk of homelessness. So that was our beginnings, and very soon after that, I jumped on board as a volunteer. We had a lot of other volunteers come on board, and we started, I guess, to grow from there as an organisation really based in young people at the time who wanted to make a difference, who saw issues, particularly within our peer groups, and decided that we weren't kind of okay with just sitting there and letting it pass. So yeah, we're very lucky to crowdfund initially to buy this first food truck. From there, we've run a bunch of crowdfunders, which have allowed us to open now a coffee cart and 3 cafes, with one more on the way in about a month, as well as a lot of partnerships and community really making what we do possible. So yeah, we'll look at the problem as youth homelessness, with 28,000 young people experiencing homelessness in Australia on any given night. It's pretty simple to me. It gives me a fire in the belly. It makes me very, very angry, very frustrated. And I guess that's kind of what can drive passion. So we'll let that frustration, through every now and then to make sure that we take action. And the percentage of community of people experiencing homelessness, there's 38% of those are young people under the age of 25. So young people are, disproportionately represented within that community. And that's a really, big issue for us. Obviously, I'm sure you'd all agree. our solution, as I said, started off pretty simple. Started off, let's run a kind of micro business and let's donate the profit to work that's going on within other organisations, and has grown into a work integrated social enterprise. So we train and employ young people within our venues. They go through a 6-month paid on the job training program and are supported with a range of different workshops and things like that along the way, employment support to then, ideally move out of the cycle of homelessness. Often, it's by increase of independence. It's by obviously having money, savings in their pocket, understanding how do I save this money? How do I, really make sure that I make the most of this and set myself up. And I think, really what's important is that, it is about that community. And I think, it's a word that it is thrown around a lot. But for us, it's huge. We wouldn't exist without that. We have a lot of partners who are a part of our program. We look at kind of early stage. We look at youth homelessness support organisations, so Launch Housing, Melbourne City Mission organisations like that. And they help to kind of bring young people into our program and support them throughout the time in our program. And then towards the other end of the program, we look at local employers. So we really try and do that work to bridge the gap between the program and employment, and to make sure that's not a pitfall for the young people in our program. They're actually supported right through. So very quickly, these are our current venues. So we still have the food truck. Coffee for Change is our coffee cart. It's our first module of our program. It's a very quiet, welcoming space. And that's all about kind of bringing young people into, the most relaxed environment that we can, in a space where they can have one-on-one training and be really, really intensely supported through entering into employment, most often for the first time. And then once young people have finished at Coffee for Change, they move through into one of our cafes, which the most local one obviously is Home One, which is in Brunswick. So I tend to get into the training program too early. So yeah, this is just a little map of what our program looks like. So we start with housing service providers and that connection. We make sure young people who are referred to us are ready for employment and that they do have support around them. We don't have social workers or youth workers within our team, so we really rely on other organisations, and that comes back to the partnership piece. We know what we do, we know what we're experts in, and we also know what we don't do. I'm really clear about that. Young people then move through to, coffee cart, then through generally to Home One in Brunswick, and then through to Home Two. So they get to kind of step up at each module, learn different skills, increase the intensity, increase the work that they're doing, and really the independence, so that by the time they get to Home Two, which is at Melbourne University, which, in normal times is our busiest venue, that by that stage, they're really a team member, and, they're able to work quite autonomously. And then finally, through our Open Shift program, sorry if I'm being not very good with this microphone, finally through to Open Shift, which is all about those local employment partnerships that we create. So really, as I said, bridging that gap between the program and further employment. A scattering of words for you there. So yeah, just a few things, I guess, about how we do run, and some kind of points to, again, how we've developed. And this is certainly not how we started. It's definitely been a huge phase of development for us. So 100% of our profits are directed into our mission. We have in the past operated in the 2 buckets of social enterprise, being employment and training and investing profit into programs. But yeah, we really just do the top one at the moment. We are a not-for-profit. We're also a social traders certified social enterprise, and we're very mission driven. So yeah, I guess finally just on, an entrepreneurial approach and what that means to us. I think, obviously our inception was very, very much about, being entrepreneurial and shifting and changing. And I think that's what I love about being in this role, is that, we've really got the opportunity to look at what's going on, to look at the environment, and to consider and pivot at every turn. And I think that's, incredibly important to our success, is that we've been really open to what's going on around us, what is actually the situations happening in the world, what are the young people we're supporting want and need. So for us, for example, I guess, actually the program that was funded by the Young Change Agents in the last round was our youth advisory program. So sorry, which is really all about us going back to our beneficiaries and saying, this, we do this for our beneficiaries. We do not do this for any other reason. So we need to be listening to them as much as we can. And informally, throughout the whole process, we've listened to them a lot. And that's been a really important part of pivoting and changing our program in particular often. However, we really wanted to formalize it and actually bring that youth participation or that beneficiary participation into the program as a part of it. So we've developed the framework and are just kind of finalizing some funding to be able to run this program. And what it is basically is a 6-month program. It's a day per month for beneficiaries of ours. They might have been in our program, they may have not. They'll all have had an experience of homelessness, which, I put my hand up and say, I have not. So I cannot make all these decisions about the organisation and where we're heading. And that's where we really want to keep placing that, autonomy and direction back in the hands of our beneficiaries. So yeah, beneficiaries will spend a day, a month with us. They'll do a bunch of great training with places like Yakvik. And they'll be paid for the hours they work and train with us, and they'll be developing a program around that. So we're looking at a few different projects. It may be particularly around our program or around the language we use. There's quite a few areas that we know we can improve. And what we want to say is, hey, we know this isn't 100% where it should be. Can you help us, to get it to where it should be, or to start to move it closer to where it should be? And we really hope that that iteration of that program will continue to grow our work for a long time, and for that to also feed back into our governance, to our board, and to make sure we're making really rounded decisions. So that's really exciting to us. Yeah, I guess a few other bits there. Essential partnerships, as I mentioned, partnerships have been absolutely everything to us, from, venues or places like the University of Melbourne or RMIT that have given us spaces for free to be able to operate our venues. Places like in North Community Foundation, of course, for their support for many years now in being able to run our program. All of that's been really important. And I think, as I touched on, understanding our roles. So I think there were definitely times when we wanted to be more, bigger than maybe what we are. And I think really we've worked really hard on refining who we are and making sure that we use all the other amazing resources that are out there. We have incredible people in the social enterprise space, also in the youth homelessness space, in the employability space. And we're really working on tapping into those resources and making sure that we're making the most of what's out there, because there's some incredible people around. And I think, to that point, for the young people that you all work with, I think there's a huge kind of space for young people to move into the social enterprise space and to be supporting the work that organisations like us are doing. I know that's something that we're, really looking for, is how do we keep that, stream running. We're hoping that the youth advisory program will be a really good, starting point to get young people interested in the area flowing through. But at the end of the day, my dream is that one day a young person who has come through our program will end up in my role. And I think that would be, ultimate success for us. So thank you.
Right, thanks very much, Tadil. I think this one's still working. We're having a good work out there. All right, so we've talked about community during the morning, and we also talked about passion, following the passion of young people in Sunwell. There's certainly passion there, and that's fantastic. And may it grow and grow. All right, now Roberto Danielle, who's our final speaker. He's a passionate social entrepreneur and educator, 10 years experience in delivering award-winning social entrepreneurship programs in education, business and community settings. There's a note here that he cycled over 3 years from the UK to Australia, obviously using DEX at some point, documenting the work of social entrepreneurs around the world. And in 2019, just 3 years ago, we established the Change Makers Lab, which is to help people and organisations in the social enterprise ecosystem through working with local councils and community groups, supporting aspiring and existing social entrepreneurs, working with education institutions and private sector. So in some ways, it'll be pulling together a few things that we've talked about this morning. So, Julie Mackay might make a couple of comments as well, because Roberta's also going to talk about the mentoring So please make him welcome, Roberto Daniel. And just a reminder from me that all the slides shown today by presenters will be sent out to you. You might have made your own notes, that makes sense, but we'll be sending them through to you. Cheers. Thanks, Roberto.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just on the trip note, I was like this when I started the trip. I got much fitter during the trip, and then this is 2 years of COVID. But you can't start that trip not being fit. I was a bit like this. So yes, well, thank you for the introduction. Save me giving the introduction. I would just wanted to add that, you know, Changemakers Lab has come on the tail of my experiences of working in university. I call myself a reformed academic. I've always been very entrepreneurial in my work in academia. And I started this bottom-up project when I was working in Oxford. I started the ACRE program, which was the Oxford Social Entrepreneurship program, which became one of the national best performing programs in social entrepreneurship in the UK. By then, though, I had been in academia for about 20 years. I decided it was time to put my money in where my words were, and was inciting everyone to be entrepreneurial and do their own stuff. So it's my turn to do that. And what I wanted to do was translate my 10 years of experiences of developing entrepreneurial programs and bring them to community settings or whatever. So Changemakers Lab, as I said, starts social enterprise startups. I do that with one-to-one mentoring and coaching. But I also do that by working with existing accelerator programs. And particularly in Australia, the focus of my work has been on migrants and refugees communities and helping migrants and refugees community to go with the startups. I work as an entrepreneur in residence with Catalyzer, incredible organization that do migrant and refugees program. Usman is the CEO of the company, amazing guy, look him up. And more recently, I also lead for Runway, their migrant and refugee program that was a result of federal funding. So for a whole series of circumstances, I've focused a lot on migrants and refugees, and my previous focus has not very much been on primary and secondary school, but has been social entrepreneurship in the university environment. And that's why when Elin approached me to be a mentor, I was so happy to do that, because I wanted to have that experience in the schools. So thank you, Inland, and thank you, Social Enterprise Hub, to having me there. And I have to say that has been quite an enlightening experience. I was one of those people that experienced day one, complete blank, a set of blank boxes on Zoom. And I mean complete, there wasn't one that was open. So, coming from a university, as you can imagine, where everyone's very, very engaged and very participatory in Oxford and whatever, to this sort of wall of silence was interesting. But it was so rewarding to see those blank screens become 100% live within 2 or 3 sessions. So that was quite interesting. One thing I really want to say is that, the teachers, the role of the teachers has been amazing. We talked a lot, we're talking here a lot about the role of the mentors, and that's great and it's important, whatever. But the dedication I've seen through this program of the teachers and the passion and the commitment and the engagement has been incredible. So hat off to all the wonderful teachers that I've managed to meet. I think these programs would not be possible if there wasn't that partnership with the schools. And I think that the partnership with the school is a very, very important element of any of these programs, whether sort of outsourced and delivered by someone else or whether they're delivered entirely in the schools. I think that that combination of roles is essential. A few thoughts. So I've been asked to give a few thoughts about, my experience as a mentor. And, for me, I know from mentoring that it's always a two-way street and you have a lot to learn. What I wanted to share back is maybe 2 or 3 points of, and I'll try to be brief because I know that I'm standing between lunch and discussions and networks. But I always start with, let's look at the vision and let's look at the long-term vision. I mean, I think that what you have in your hands, David, it's an incredible opportunity for eventually down the track, schools becoming anchors of place and anchors of social entrepreneurship in the community. I know that the intention is there, but if I may say so, I think the intention could be more ambitious, okay? In the sense of really, really having schools as hubs, not just for the students and not just for the students to meet with other social enterprises, but actually as hubs and resources for the entire community. So one of I mentioned the award-winning program that we delivered in the UK. One of our winning social enterprises was called School Space. Look them up, www.school-space. And what they do is they identify resources in schools, and at the moment it's mainly physical resources, and they put them out for rent. Okay, so the schools become almost a central point for usage of their facilities, and they become an anchor of place. So, you know, you want to have dance classes, book a room. You want to have whatever, book a room. You want to have courses delivered there, book a room in the school. So making schools very much the center of what can be done. I mean, you have incredible resources, both physical and in terms of the teachers, but also in terms of the students that can be used in a more entrepreneurial way. So I think that schools can become more entrepreneurial, and there's a lot of opportunity to do some work there. One of my observations linked to this one is, particularly in the school where I was mentoring, you could see that, you know, there was this peaking of enthusiasm. And then when you start actually saying, okay, what do we need to make this happen? And when you start looking at the resources, that's where a lot of students hit the big wall. And the thing is that if you take that approach I said before, the resources are in the schools. So maybe rather than getting students to be social entrepreneurs on their own, they could be social intrapreneurs for the school. Okay, and I think that I'm not saying that shouldn't be social entrepreneurs, but there are some resources limitations, and the resource for them to be entrepreneurial can be the school and the resources of the school. In my case, I had a kid that wanted to do a food business, but once you start looking at cost of food carts, cost of everything, etc., licensing and whatever, that was impossible. And we started exploring possibilities and say, why don't we use the school? It has a kitchen, it has this, it has that. Why don't you use the school as a base of this? Now, I'm also conscious there's a lot of legal limitation and issues that need to be worked around, but I think that the potential is immense, immense. So that's the consideration number one. Consideration number two, there was going to be an invitation, but now I'm glad to see that it's just a comment. Congratulations to David. I really liked your speech, and I liked your focus on social innovation, social economy, social enterprise. For a brief moment when Vivian left, I have to say, I said, oh, are we going to lose this? But I'm glad that that is not lost. I think it should be not only a component, but I think it should be the central component. I think that, you know, if it was me running the show, I would say, forget about micro enterprise, just focus on social innovation and social enterprise. The state of the world requires us to be quite focused, and we owe it to our students to give them an opportunity to make that kind of impact on the world. So I think, you know, the fact that the focus is staying, it's great. Last but not least, so this is more like a comment on generic, I'm not specifically, but looking at around a lot of social entrepreneurship programs in schools, there's one bit of focus. I'm not saying it's not there, but I think it could be there in a stronger way. So Einstein's family said, you know, if I had 1 hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes trying to understand the problem and then 5 minutes trying to solve it. And one of the things that either we don't do well or we don't do enough with social entrepreneurship programs is that getting students to really understand the problem. We just dive them in these programs where they have to do things or come up with a project or come up with a solution or whatever, without giving them enough time to really, what we call in the social enterprise world, apprenticeship with the problem. In fact, I think that area of apprenticeship with the problem, social, environmental, whatever it is, could be a whole subject area, could be a whole dimension of delivery. I know this is at the university system, but with our partners in Oxford University, there's a really, really interesting project, which is exactly about this, about recognizing that you can't pretend to go out and solve social problems, environmental problems with very basic or no understanding of those. And it's called, look it up again, Oxford University Map the System. It's obviously geared, it's an international competition. And it's really recognized and say, before you go off and do social entrepreneurship, spend time learning with the problem. Spend time really understanding. And I saw this at the university level, in my university, all the time. People say, oh, we want to do this for the homeless and whatever. And I've got this idea. Okay. And I will ask them, okay, so how much have you spoken with a homeless person? How much time have you spent with a homeless person? Do you know what other organizations are already? No, but this is my idea. It's great. And in many programs, we go, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Off you go, here's a program to help you do that. And sometimes those ideas we know are more counterproductive because they have not well thought through. So that's one last thought for the program, is saying, and this is not a comment on this particular program, it's a generic problem of many programs where we rush students into solutions, without them understanding the problem properly. So, the usual story, fall in love with the problem, don't fall in love with the solution. So that's a really, I think, important point to make. Having said that, last comment, I think the social entrepreneurship ecosystem in education is evolving dramatically. It's grown, thanks to the pioneering work of ACRE and other organizations, Young Change Makers, and many other programs. I think that sector, let's call it a sector, it's evolving. I think schools are understanding that the time has come, and I hope that after this 2 years of pause or semi-pause, COVID-induced pause, we're going to have another takeoff and really much more engagement of schools with social enterprise. That's all I had to say, other than thanking again. I cannot say how impressed I've been with the teachers I've been involved with and their work. Sorry that Dom's not here with us to thank him personally with the work that I did with him. And pass over to Julie. We might want to also have some comments on the mentoring. Thank you.
I won't use my Dickie neck joke again, so I'll sit out on this side. So again, thanks for being involved. Thank you, Roberto, as well, for your inspiration and your work in the UK as well. It's terrific. From my perspective, just the main thought for me, and look out Concord, because this is heading your way very shortly, is the context of the program and the circular economy, and then putting innovation into that space as well. So looking at innovative products and services and what can be created from what we consider to be waste. I'll give you some examples. Japan, the Olympics, e-waste. RAM, which is apparently it's not a sheep, which I thought it was for many moons, but apparently it's something inside a computer. So RAM, CPUs, circuit boards, etc. They've all got precious metals on them. Innovation, Olympics, let's make our metals out of precious metals. Tick, right? That's a great idea. So there's inspiration there from something that's waste that the students can then look at to create a new product or service. Another terrific one that I saw was fans that come out of computers. People that do camping in remote areas, they've got a fan, they invented something, popped into a stream, charges your battery for your phone, off you go. So those sorts of things we'd like to look at, and then in the context of an online shop, is there other ways that we can look to the circular economy and the reuse, repurpose and repair sort of type space, and see what happens next. So that's my thoughts for next time round. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much to all the speakers we've had today. I think there'll be, Peter, I think will be gathering you together to provide a particular thanks. We're just going to have a round table for 15 minutes before we go to lunch, and there'll be I'm anticipating there'll be an inland person at each table just to sort of pull a few things together. It's probably a little bit about, what you thought of the morning, and also what might be the next steps you take, regardless of what circumstance you're in, what role you play, what organisation you're from. So I've been really pleased today to be with you, and I've been inspired to stay on as chair, if I'm welcome, of the Youth Enterprise Hub Working Party. David, when you spoke before, looked at the elements of it, and we've had more information today, other inputs today that can add to that under the various headings, other options that educational settings, to tap into. But it's also the people who aren't connected with educational settings as well. We've talked about a few groups there as well, the disconnect. So it's the really young, as Pete was talking about, and then taking that through the 20s up to 30 or whatever, and using some longitudinal interactions with people over time, depending on what role they play within the programs that we're running. So I would be hopeful that every educational institution can get something from the hub as we grow, develop and extend, and that every young person in the inner north, it's possible that they can get some value out of the hub as well. So it's not the LEN doing all the hard work, it's helping set that up, keep it going, and then the people who have got like minds in terms of the value of it, but very differing minds in terms of how the value might be achieved, will all contribute to that as well. So thanks very much, and have your chat. I think the question, I've told you what the questions are, and we'll see you at lunch, and we'll see you again in the future.